Hi gang, today we're going to be looking at what's called consecutive integer word problems. So hopefully you know what the word consecutive means. Consecutive means in order or in a row. So when we're talking about consecutive numbers, think numbers in a row like 7, 8, 9, 10, 21, 22, 23, negative 10, negative 9, negative 8, and so on. Okay, you could change that up and say consecutive even, and then you would have things like 4, 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, or consecutive odd, and that would be things like 7, 9, 11, or 21, 23, 25. Those are consecutive integers. Integers are just positive and negative whole numbers, so they could be positive or negative. Here are some examples. So that's basically what I just went over, and some examples for you to look at in case you need to refer back to them. So using variables makes this a little bit tricky. So we're going to use variables to represent consecutive integers and to build equations. So if x represents an integer, what will represent the next consecutive integer and the next? So if x is some number, to get the next number, all I have to do is add 1. So x is our first integer, x plus 1 would be the next, x plus 2 would be the next, x plus 3 would be the next, x plus 4 would be the next, x plus 5 would be the next. And by writing that, I get a certain number of integers in a row. By getting to x plus 5, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 integers ready to go to prepare an equation. If x represents an integer, what will represent the next consecutive even integer? Well, remember, even numbers are 2 apart. So if I'm saying x is even, to get to the next even number, I would just have to add 2. Then add 2 again, which gives me x plus 4. Then add 2 again, which gives me x plus 6. Then add 2 again, which gives me x plus 8, and so on. Then what confuses people the most is when we ask for consecutive odd integers. Odd integers are still only 2 apart. So if you start with an odd, again, you add 2 repetitively. It's just like saying even. So if we start with x and we know that's odd, say it's 7, to get to 9, I need to add 2. To get to 11 from 7, I would add 4. To get to 13 from 7, I would add 6. To get to 15 from 7, I would add 8, and so on. All right, so that's what we're going to be looking at to build an equation that represents consecutive integers. All right, let's take a look at some equations. Again, I'm going to be jumping around in the notes. Make sure you're following along, writing down everything I write down. When I'm done with the problems I'm going to show to you, you're then going to work on the other problems on your own or with a partner, checking in after you complete each one so I can make sure that they are done correctly. All right, so starting with number 4, considering the above, write and solve an equation for each of the following. Number 4, find 2 consecutive integers that have a sum of 89. So we only need 2 integers. The first one's always x. Then because it's 2 integers, the next one is going to be x plus 1. I have to add them because it says sum. So I get 2x plus 1 equals 89. Solve, very simple equation, minus 1. So 2x equals 88. Divide. X equals 44. So what are the 2 integers? 4 and 45. Because 44 plus 45 is going to make 89. Very, very simple. All right, let's take a look at the next example. Number 5, find 3 consecutive integers that have a sum of 75. Again, it's just consecutive, so my first integer is going to be x. My second is x plus 1. My third is x plus 2. Have a sum, so that's 3 x's plus 3 equals 75. And again, a really simple equation. We subtract 3 from both sides. 3x equals 72. Divide by 3, and x equals, well, 3 goes into 7 twice with 1 left over, and 3 goes into 12 4 times. So x equals 24. So my 3 integers are 24, 25, and 26. Now, if this was a test question, it's really important that you list all the integers, not just the first one. based on how this problem is worded. It says find all three, not just the first integer. And 24 plus 25 plus 26 does add up to 75, so we are correct. All right, jumping to number 7. Find 3 consecutive even integers that have a sum of 114. So even, so now we're not just adding 1 each time. We start with x, now we're adding 2, and then adding 4. Sum again, we're going to add all those 3 up. We have 3x's plus 6 equals 114. Subtract 6 from both sides. So 3x equals 108. Divide by 3. And x equals, well, 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over, because 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 1 makes 10. And then 3 into 18 is 6. So my first integer is 36. So it's 36, 38, and 40. And those 3 should add up to 114. If I wanted to check it, I could do 40 plus 38 is 78 plus 36 is 114. So we did it correctly. All right. Hopefully you're finding these very, very easy. Let's try the next problem. Jumping to number 8. Find 3 consecutive even integers now with an average of 80. So hopefully you remember that calculating an average is adding all the numbers together and dividing by the number of numbers you added together. Okay, so when teacher calculates your average of all your tests, they add up all those test grades divided by the number of tests that you took. So this time we have 3 consecutive even, very similar to what we had in the last problem. So we start with x, then we have x plus 2, and then x plus 4 gives us 3x plus 6 again. And since that is the average, or that's the sum of all 3, and we want to calculate an average, I'm going to divide it by 3. 3 numbers divided by 3 gives me an average of those 3 numbers, and that equals 80. So now again, there are 2 ways I can do this. I can divide both the terms by 3, or I can multiply both sides by 3. I'm going to do it both ways just to show you what would happen. So if I multiply both sides by 3 first to get rid of that denominator, I get 3x plus 6 equals 3 times 8 is 24, keep the 0, 240. Over here, if I divide both of these terms by 3, I get x plus 2 equals 80. Now over here, I would subtract 6 from both sides. So 3x equals 234. Here, I just subtract 2, and I get x equals 78. So this should be 78. Let's make sure. Divide by 3, divide by 3. X equals, well, 3 goes into 23 7 times. That gives me 21. So I have 2 left over. And 3 goes into 24 8 times. So my solutions are the same. X equals 78. You can do it either way. Okay, so now that's my first number. So the 3 numbers that have an average of 80 would be 78, 80, and 82. Done. Okay, so remember average. Whenever you're calculating something with an average, you have to divide the sum by the number of numbers. All right, let's take a look at the next problem. So jumping to number 10. Jack received 3 grades on assessments that are consecutive even integers. Half the sum of all 3 decreased by 29 is equal to 100. Find his scores. All right, so now we're getting a little bit tricky. 3 grades. Jack received 3 grades that are consecutive even integers. So again, we have x, and x plus 1, and x plus 2, not 1, 2 because they're even, and 4. So in a lot of the problems we're seeing a lot of 3 integers. It's not always 3 integers. If it was 4, I would just do one more here as x plus 6. If it was 5, I would add one more here as x plus 8, and so on, depending on how many integers they're asking for. The first is always just x. So again, half the sum. So we have to find the sum of these 3. And again, that would be 3x plus 6. And now I can build my equation. So half the sum of 3x plus 6, remember, whenever it says half or something of a sum or a difference, you need parentheses, decreased, so minus 29, is equal to 100. All right, so now we can solve the equation. I'm going to start by adding 29 just to get rid of this minus 29 on the end. And I get 1/2 of 3x plus 6 equals 129. Now, again, there are two ways I can do this. So I'm going to rewrite it. You can pick which way you are most comfortable with. I could either distribute the 1/2 first or multiply both sides by 2. So here, if I distribute 1/2 first, I get 3/2 x plus 3. Okay, 3/2 because it's 1 times 3 is 3 and 2 times 1 is 2 equals 129. Here, if I multiply both sides by 2, get rid of the fraction, I get 3x plus 6 equals 2 times 9 is 18, carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. 2 times 1 is 2, 258. All right, so now I'm going to solve both these sides. They're pretty similar equations, two-step equations. It's up to you to decide which step you want to do first. I would subtract 3 here. So I have 3/2 x equals 126. Then multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2/3. So x equals, well, 3 goes into 12 4 times and into 6 twice. So it's 42 times 2, which is 84. And over here, subtract 6. So 3x equals 252. Then divide by 3. And x equals, well, 3 goes into 25 8 times with 1 left over. And 3 goes into 12 4 times. So again, 84. Now we know they were 3 consecutive even integers. So our first is 84, then 86, then 88. So Jack received grades of 84, 86, and 88 on his 3 assessments. Okay, so again, you don't have to do both of these ways. I just want to show you that either way is going to work out to the same result. You do the way that you are most confident with. All right, on to number 11. And the last problem I believe I'm going to do with you today. Okay, so number 11, find 5 consecutive odd integers such that 1/3 the sum of the first 3 plus 3/4 the sum of the last 2 is equivalent to 55. So now we're getting a lot more challenging. Go back. All right, so 5 consecutive odd integers this time. Again, the first one is x. Then the second one is x plus 2. The third, x plus 4. The fourth, x plus 6. And the fifth, x plus 10. So we've got 5 consecutive odd integers. Oh, I missed x plus 8. I wanted to jump to 10. Whoops, don't make that mistake. All right, so now we have to build this equation such that 1/3 the sum of the first 3, 1/3 the sum of the first 3. So 3x plus 6, and it's 1/3 of that, plus 3/4 the sum of the last 2. That's these two, so that's 2x plus 14, and it's 3/4. It should say fourths there, not that's just 3/4. So plus 3/4 of 2x plus 14 is equal to 55. Whew, lots of things going on there. So now we need to distribute to get rid of the parentheses. 1/3 here makes this easy. 1/3 of 3 is 1x. 1/3 of 6 is 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Plus 3/4 times 2. Well, I can't do 2 divided by 4. I get a half. So I'm going to do 3 times 2, which is 6. Then leave the denominator 4, because it's like doing 2 over 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 1 is 4. X plus 14 divided by 4, I can't do in my head either. So I'm going to think of this as 14 over 1. 3 times 14 is 52. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry the 1. I'm sorry, it's 42 over 4 equals 55. Okay, so now I've got some fractions going on here. It might be easier to change those fractions into decimals at this point. And since I'm dividing by 4, I know it's going to come out as a quarter. It's not going to be some repeating decimal. So I can change those to decimals to make my life easier. So I've got x plus 2 plus 4 goes into 6 once with 2 left over, and 2/4 is a half. So that's 1.5x plus 4 goes into 42 10 times with 2 left over, and that's 2/4, which is also a half. So it's 10 and a half equals 55. Now I want to combine like terms. So we have x and 1.5x is 2.5x. Then 2 and 10.5 is 12.5 equals 55. Now I can subtract 12.5 from both sides. So I get 2.5x equals, have to borrow from the 5, I get a 4. 10 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 2 is 2. 5 minus 1 is 4. So it's 42.5. Divide by 2.5. Divide by 2.5. So x equals, now 42.5 divided by 2.5 might be a little bit tricky to do in your head. So if you need to, you can pull out your calculator. I'm just going to pull out the computer one real quick here, and I'm going to do 42.5 divided by 2.5, and we get an answer of 17. So x equals 17. Okay, so again, it was 5 consecutive odd integers. So 17 is our first odd, then 19, then 21, then 23, and last 25. Done. All right, so now you guys are on your own. Go ahead and work on the other problems in today's notes. Raise your hand if you have questions, chat with your partners, make sure you're doing it correctly before you move on to the next problem.